Well, let me just welcome everyone here and thank our participants, Lauri, Joanna, Beth, and Amanda, for being so willing to share their knowledge, and today for us to be able to talk about this remote leadership of our teams. And I'm going to mute myself and let them take over.
I wanted to welcome you all officially to this webinar, the IWCA webinar. This webinar focuses on project management and maintaining communication, team camaraderie, and quality assurance when you're working in an online environment. So our goal here today is to present advice and resources to help you when you're leading your teams in this online environment. I work at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences as a writing coach, and Joanna Beth Tweedy is at Western Governors University. She's a writing instructor in the Writing Center. And Amanda Temkiewicz is a supervisor of the Writing Center at Western Governors University. We wanted to highlight some processes that will help keep your teams unified during this time, because communication and unity is really going to be key during this challenging transition that we're making from an in-person to an online environment. So as managers or as team leads, you're going to set the tone for how your coworkers are going to react to this transition. You can embrace a growth mindset that will inspire your teams to be flexible and service-oriented and cohesive. And everything that you do is going to enable educators to support learning environments for your students and provide those points of contact that's so vital right now for students and for your team during this period of social distancing. So you may never have chosen this path for yourself, but you were placed on it. So migrating teams, programs, and processes to an online environment might be challenging to you, but when you find that you return to your normal operations, you might want to retain some of the techniques that you have experienced or have used during this online time. So again, embrace that growth mindset. Say, I can use this to make myself a stronger leader, and I can find some new tools that can make our team more cohesive and better organized for our projects. So I want to pass along now the presentation to Amanda and to Joanna Beth, and I'm going to moderate the chat.
Thanks, and thank you so much, Sherry, for hosting this. This is just wonderful of the International Writer Centers Association to offer this opportunity. So the tools and strategies that you'll be learning about today, they're going to be presented in the context of leading a team of instructors. And that's simply because each of us has been a leader of faculty. So Amanda is the faculty manager at WGU. I was a dean of academic affairs for several years at Benedictine before joining WGU, and Lauri actually trained Amanda and me at WGU, so we've all been there. But even though we'll be speaking in that context of leading faculty, these tools and strategies are applicable across all kinds of different teams. And the message you're going to be hearing today is purposefully one about leading. You're definitely going to be introduced to tools that are going to help tremendously as you manage the projects and the documentation. And these will be tools that can help you communicate with your team to build the necessary connections and build the trust that are essential to high-performing teams. So know that we do plan to equip you with lots of tools to manage all the things, but you will not learn about any tools to manage people. And the reason for that is simple. People are not managed. People are led. Think of any kind of leadership situation where something enormous was accomplished. The beaches of Normandy were not successfully stormed because we managed people through the sand. The soldiers, the heroes of that battle, were led. And to further distinguish the two, I'm going to draw upon the old adage we've probably all heard that leading a group of faculty is like herding cats. And I'm bringing this up because recently I was in a conversation with someone, and I'm using this with his permission, and he was completely bumfuzzled about how this whole online thing was going to work with his team of instructors. And he said, you know, this isn't going to be like herding cats. This is going to be like herding cats who aren't even in the same place. They're in completely different fields from one another. In fact, they might as well be on different planets and different galaxies. I mean, how in the world am I going to manage this? And the answer to that question is simple as well. You're not going to manage it. You're going to lead it. Again, people are not managed. Crises are managed, projects are managed, people are not. People are led. And it doesn't matter if you are the middlest of the middle manager with the bareliest of decision-making capacities and the tiniest budget at your organization. If you're going to set out trying to manage people, you might as well go to Mars to track down that cat, because you're going to end up chasing your own tail. Management is, by definition, about control. Leadership is showing the way, being the light, and illuminating the path. One of the most important aspects of your communication with your team, it's going to be that trust and the cohesiveness that you build. Many of our colleagues today have been recently and abruptly moved online. So they have been displaced from the communities they've been connecting with for years. Offering those opportunities for continued community building and communication are paramount right now. So leverage the management tools we talk about today as the tools of cohesion for your team. Cohesion is an immense force of stabilization amid disorder, and we are experiencing immense destabilization. And that's not only in our work lives, but in every aspect of our daily world. This crisis is going to touch all of us in a very personal way, in some way, shape, or form. And it's important to remember, we've been separated from one another. Humans are hardwired to connect, and behavioral scientists have demonstrated very clearly for many decades that from birth, we are hardwired to touch. Now, I know that there are aspects of touch that are not appropriate in the workplace environment, but you get what I'm saying. So in a best case scenario, all of us would have these continued community building opportunities in place, ways we can gather synchronously at a distance at once, because we need these touch points. And with everything all of us are experiencing right now, it is very possible that your teammates need that substantive touch point in their lives more than ever before. And I'm going to pass it to Amanda, who's going to share some practical ways to make this happen.
Thanks, Joanna Beth. So as Lauri likes to tell us, it's important to communicate about communication, which, I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but it's really, really important. And it's also really important if this is the first time your team is online. If this is a big transition, if you've never done anything like this with your team, it is crucial that you do know how you're going to communicate together. So one important aspect, and it seems kind of obvious, but it's to share contact information so that you guys know how to connect with each other. If you've been in the same building and you can pop down the hall and walk in and talk to someone, or you can lean over and talk to someone in the next classroom or something, you may not have needed to share contact information before, but now it's crucial because you're going to need to connect away from each other. And in relation to that, it's important to share personal information like birthdays, anniversaries, names of pets, and things like that that allow for people to feel like there's a little bit of a community there. And you can create space for that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit throughout this presentation, where to create that space, how to create that space, and how to foster it a little bit. And in relation to that, you can share goals and achievements. So even though you are separated from each other, you can still do all of these things. And one thing that we do on our team, we use Microsoft Teams, and we've created a channel in there that's called Community Care Connections. And we share a lot of these things in there. Funny pictures of our kids. Sometimes we even share memes and things like that that make us laugh, because humor is really important during stressful times. Somebody the other day took a screenshot of a really funny thing that was posted on Twitter, and a whole conversation took place from there. And sometimes it's even relevant to our publications and things like that. We have someone on our team that recently published a chat book, and he shared that on our community page. So it's just really important that you do make sure to share this contact information, all this personal stuff that maybe we forget about when we have this barrier between us, this computer between us. So it's just really important, I think, to make sure that you help your team stay connected in this way. And JB, I think you were going to add something about celebrating the strengths and the wins there.
Yes, and I think you touched on it really, that, celebrate the joys in life as well. This is going to be a painful time for a lot of people, and focusing on those joys is going to be important, but also focusing on people's strengths, Now is not a time to focus on deficits. The research tells us that when we focus on another person's strengths, the things that they can achieve are out of sight. When we focus on weaknesses, yes, people can make incremental progress towards strengthening those weaknesses, but the progress is just that. It's incremental, and it levels off at a certain point in many cases. So focus on strengths. You build people up when you focus on their strengths, but not only that, you allow them to do the job they were born to do. Our strengths are our natural talents. They're the gifts we were born with. They make up our core purpose. They make up our why. We use our strengths in life to pursue our why and to put our why into effect in the world. So touching and tapping people's strengths right now is more critical than ever. And I think it's important, essential to remember that as you lead people through this. And in terms of communication, you're going to want to offer opportunities for communication at the group and team levels, and also at the individual level when you build upon these strengths and have these conversations with your teammates. Now, the team level communication, that's going to be centered on the typical things you talk about as a team, but it's also going to be a place for people to socialize. And you've got to remember to offer that opportunity right now. You know your team norms way better than I do. So if you have very structured, formal meetings, then maybe offer a separate group opportunity to socialize. But if you have normally very fluid meetings where socialization is a natural part of the conversation that takes place when agenda items are discussed, then perhaps just allow a little extra time for team meetings these days so that that socialization has time to take place and enough time. The takeaway piece is just allow your team additional opportunities to connect with one another. So if you compare the two images on this slide, you'll see aspects in the images that are representative of what's happened in our work colleagues' environments. So the more you can allow people to connect with one another in that environment in the bottom picture, the better off your team is going to be. And that connection, those touch points, they can be synchronous and asynchronous. It doesn't all have to be synchronous, but it should not all be asynchronous. You've got to have those synchronous connections. And this is for one-on-ones as well. So, schedule one-on-ones with each of your direct reports. And you can certainly create these touch points with others you work with who may not be your direct reports. So look at the woman's face on this slide. She's probably not looking at text in that image. She's probably looking at another person's face. And Amanda's going to talk some more about that and the importance of that. Some members of your team are going to need these face-to-face touch points more than others, and you've got to be mindful of that. So you don't have to schedule your one-on-one check-ins with everyone on your team with the same frequency. So just because so-and-so meets with the boss more often doesn't mean they're the teacher's pet or that they're in trouble or anything like that. It may mean that they're living alone. Maybe they're in quarantine. Maybe we're under lockdown and they're by themselves. And human connection is everything to them right now. Or it may mean that they're like me and my husband with full-time online jobs. And now we've just had a 5- and 6-year-old Irish twins thrown into the mix with their schools closing. And we've got to keep them busy and quiet during our meetings. And we're both juggling this. And it's hard. It is not easy. They're good kids too. I mean, imagine if you didn't have good kids. So, set expectations, but be flexible to these situations and know that while in a typical remote working environment, your colleague would have a dedicated, quiet office space to work in their home, no doubt. But right now, that may not be entirely possible into a closet, and no one wants to spend the day in a closet. So accept that there are going to be interruptions. There are going to be disruptions to the schedules of people. An 8 to 4 day may not be possible for your direct report. It may need to be 8 to 10, and then 1 to 4, and then 8 to 9:30 at night after the kids are in bed. Everyone's going to be different. And it's important to just recognize this.
Can I jump in, Joanna, Beth? I would love to hear from our participants how they are using check-ins with their staff right now. I know during this transition, a lot of people have been trying to see if everyone's okay. So how are those one-on-one check-ins happening? Are you having appointments? Are you calling each other? Are you emailing? If you could type in the chat how that's happening right now, we'd love to see that. Text, phone calls, a group me app. I haven't heard of that one. That's great. Zoom meetings, Google Hangouts. That's a great way to connect. Fantastic. So dropping in using office hours on Microsoft Teams for people to drop into. Great idea, Elizabeth. And primarily via email. And sometimes in the early part of the transition, that's the best you can do, as you're trying to get things established. I would encourage, as Joanna Beth said, to try and get the face involved, to get on video if you can. But these are fantastic. Thank you for sharing these.
So I'll piggyback on that. That's exactly what this slide is all about. So this is one of my direct reports. He gave me permission to use this, don't worry. So we had our check-in yesterday, and we do use the camera for the webcam for our check-ins. Now, extenuating circumstances, as Joanna Beth mentioned, should absolutely be considered. If there are kids at home or something's going on, use your judgment there. But I will tell you, lots and lots of people, when they move to an online environment, resist the camera. I certainly get it. I'm an exercise fanatic. I'm often in exercise clothes, and I was like, man, I'm going to have to put on a nice shirt, stuff like that. But I'll tell you what, there is a huge difference when you can see the person speaking. I'm a hands talker. Like, I'm one of those people. I come from an Italian family. We're very expressive people. And I think when you can see people's facial expressions, and all of that body language, it just makes a huge difference. So if you're talking to Patrick in the slide, the image here where you can see him, right? You could see him, you talk to him, versus just staring at his initials. There's just so much more engagement if you can look at each other. So I encourage you to try that with your team when possible. There may be a little resistance at first, but I really think that it helps connect, particularly for teams that are new to this sort of environment where they're used to seeing each other. They're going to miss seeing each other's faces. They're going to miss seeing your face, which may sound sort of funny to say, but it's really true. So we just encourage you to do this, again, when possible, when appropriate. It just helps to connect people together. Okay, so during your check-ins, another thing that I recommend is using a shared online notebook. This is an example of the one that I use. And the way this works is that during the week, I may put in a few things in this notebook for each of I have one for each of my direct reports. And I'll throw something in here because I'm the kind of person, if I don't put something down when I'm thinking about it, I'll be sitting in the check-in going, wait, what was I going to tell you? Like, I'll forget it. And so I might slap in here under updates or current climate, something like, hey, awesome work on that last project, or let's follow up on that question you asked in our team meeting, or something just for me to remember. And I like for my direct reports to do the same. Now, some weeks people put lots in here ahead of time, and some weeks there's nothing. That's no big deal to me. You guys can set the expectations for your teams. But it's helpful, I think, to have a place to plant items to talk about during the check-ins if you want. We also both type in here during the talk, during the one-on-one session. We take some notes, and mine is saved in Google. It's a Google Doc, so it's a great place. It's saved, it's housed, we can refer back to it. Sometimes I plant links in here, things like that. And we talk through things, and then we have this. So we use this for during our live chats when we're on camera and talking, but I also sometimes use this asynchronously. So let's say somebody has a really rough week, their kids are all off school. I have a colleague that has 5 children at home with her right now. And so it's more difficult for her to meet live. So you can use this asynchronously too for a check-in with somebody you can't actually talk to that week. You guys can put questions in here and have a conversation this way. It may be preferred to do 1 week a live call with a video if you can, and 1 week like this. That's going to be up to you guys to determine for your teams. But having a shared online notebook is really a great idea. And you can absolutely change this in any way you want. Like, you can add things to, change things. WGU really focuses on leadership principles, which is why we have the category there. And I like to have the box about individual development. So if there's something that person's really working on, reinforcing, it's great to have a place to save that. So then they have a record of like, oh, this week I did awesome.
Amanda, we have a great question in the chat.
Sure.
how many faculty members you're currently managing with the system. She has 60, and checking in on this with all of them doesn't seem manageable.
No, that would be really hard. So we have a team of 21 and I lead 11. So I only have 11 direct reports right now. If you have that many, you absolutely are going to need to be more creative. There's no way you're meeting live. So you may want to consider, meeting once a month and splitting them up, or using more asynchronous type of notebook support like this. And that is a great question. The larger your team is, the more creative you're going to have to be in how you meet with them and you check in on them.
May I suggest something too?
Please.
When you have a situation like this, you have to think on the fly, and sometimes you can trust other team members to become sub-team leads, and perhaps you can delegate check-in groups as peer support. So think about maybe delegating that and creating mini groups within your group of 60 and designating leaders there, and you can check with the leaders to keep in contact to see what's going on.
I was going to suggest something similar, Lauri, about grouping, or at least having leads that, but that is going to be something difficult to navigate. I do not envy you with that large of a team, and I think hopefully we'll give you some creative approaches, but it will be harder the larger your team is, but hopefully you can come up with some methods, and feel free to share whatever you come up with the rest of us so we can all learn from each other. Any other questions before I move on? That was a great question.
Someone asked, what is SBI? I guess I missed
Sure.
that.
Yeah, I can talk about that real fast. So that's similar to even me saying I like for people to have a space to record their individual development. SBI stands for Situation, Behavior, and Impact. So it would be someone keeping a record of sort of like a win for them, meaning I had this situation happen. The student was really upset during our appointment. That was the situation, and they would elaborate on what it was. Then they would list the behavior. What did they do to help that student? Like what methods did they do? Did they take them to a resource? Did they walk them through their feedback on the paper, etc.? What was the behavior that individual took to support the student? And then the impact is the outcome. What happened? How did the call end on a much more positive note? Did the student then go on to pass that paper? So it's a great place to keep track of those wins. Maybe they started out as like difficult situations, but it ended, and then they don't always end on a great note. I don't mean to imply it's only about the wins. It's about anything that was a challenging situation, and ideally a lot of them are really rewarding, and you learn from it. You learn from what you did to help support that student. And sometimes talking through those are great for your direct reports, because they may say, what else could I have done? Or what would you have done? And then you guys can talk through some other scenarios and options there, and then everybody can learn from it.
Amanda, Rona asked for some clarification about the manager leader column. And
sure, I should have said that.
Do you give feedback after the faculty filled in their portion?
So I meant to say that, and I apologize. So the faculty member would fill in their column before or during or after. Really, it's any time. And the manager could put in before, during, or after. It sort of depends on how you want to use this. And I think you can set that expectation with your team. If you want things to be in there ahead of time, you can encourage that. If I add something after the fact, I will add a comment. If you insert a comment in Google, the person gets an alert. So like, let's say we add stuff before and we talk through it, and then we add more during the meeting, and then we both close out of this document. If I think of something, I really want to tell this person, or I want to put something in for next week, if I want to make sure they see it, I do insert that comment so they get that alert. But it really can be used multiple ways, and I think that's going to be up to you for determining what's best for your team. Okay, I will move us along. All right, so means of communication. So we talked about the importance of communication. Now, what are the different types of communication? So there's manager to team, team to manager, and then team to team. And I know Joanna, Beth, and Lauri both touched on this a little bit when they were talking, but it's really important that the manager or leader make sure that he or she communicates clearly to the team. Depending on the size of the team and the schedule of the team, this is going to vary. Some people are going to have their team members are all going to have the same kind of schedule. It's going to be easy to communicate and get together. And then there are going to be people that have really large teams, or teams that have all over the place schedules. One thing we do to help communicate outside of a team meeting is we have a daily or weekly document. And I'm going to show you an example of this on the next slide. And in this document, we include updates, reminders, training information. all kinds of things that the team can look at throughout the week. The nice thing about that is anyone can look at it at any time. There's no time sensitive. It's not like you have to log into it at 10 a.m. Eastern time. Like, it's when you need it, you can revisit it if there's something on it you need to know. And it's a really great way to communicate online to your team without sending 20 different emails or 20 different instant messages. So it's a great thing to do. And we house that in our shared community space. And I will show an example of that shortly. The other thing that's really, really important with team member to manager is it's important for the manager or leader to make sure that their door is open. Your teammates need to know they can talk to you. They need to know that you're there. This is especially important because they're probably brand new to being online, or they're at least brand new to being online with you as their leader. And so it's crucial that they know you're there and there's an open door policy with that. Now, with that said, with all of these, and I should have said this first, you want to set expectations and guidelines. And I'll tell you why. Something that I do to my husband on a regular basis that drives him absolutely nuts is I'll send him an email via Gmail, I'll text him, and I'll send him a message on Facebook Messenger, which is sort of an unwieldy, not so great process because he's not quite sure which one to reply to. And then we might have communication in two of them. I might be texting and emailing, and then it just gets messy. So one thing you want to do, whether it's the way you communicate to them or they communicate to you, is set some expectations and parameters, whatever that looks like for you. So for example, I may tell my direct reports, if you have a quick question, it's not real lengthy, shoot me a message on Teams. It's just the way we use sort of like an instant messenger chat. If something's a little more detailed and includes screenshots or a history, a conversation, that they had with the student, send me an email. But you might want to think about what that communication looks like and give some guidance. Otherwise, you're going to get all different kinds of communication coming in from different ways, and it's very difficult to deal with that. And so you might want to sketch out the advice you would give your team ahead of time and then give them the advice about the best way to communicate with you. And that also goes with them communicating with each other. It is crucial that they have some space and time to talk to each other. They need community. But the bottom line here is setting expectations and guidelines for any and all of this communication so that people are clear and sure about how to communicate with each other. Any questions about that? I know I just threw a lot at you guys.
Not seeing any questions.
Okay, let me show the doc then, which goes with this. So this is our manager weekly doc, and we post this in our Teams channel every Monday morning. And these are the options we have on here, and I'd love to hear from you guys what else you would add to this. So feel free as I'm talking to throw in the chat what other items or topics you think might be relevant to put on this. In fact, I may end up editing ours based on the advice you give. But we tend to put updates, anything new, any new updates that are in my inbox from our leadership or something like that. Any reminders, this section's crucial. You may think you delivered something clearly in a team meeting, but then it becomes quite clear over the next few days that there's some confusion. It's a great place to add a reminder or clarification, or maybe a few people were out and they missed the meeting, things like that. That spot is great for reminding people about something. If there's training you think that they may benefit from, or optional reading, anything like that where you want to put in, like, here's a webinar that might help our team, here's some links. And then the last section is this week's events. We host some live events for students, and it's very hard to remember when they all are. And so we like to put the weekly upcoming events there so that when our team is working with students, they'll say, hey, I know you're revising this paper. We have a revision cohort this week. It's on Wednesday. And so it's nice so people don't have to do the digging to find the live events. We put it there for them. And where I get this information, some of it comes from our leadership asking for me to communicate with our team. Some of it comes from my own perception based on conversations I'm having with individuals or, conversation I see in our team's channel. And then some of it people ask to put on here. Like we ask, hey, is there something you guys want on here? What is missing? And so you can ask your team for recommendations here as well. And so Lauri, I'm not sure, did anybody give any other items they'd add here? I'd love to hear some suggestions.
Kim was saying that she has a whiteboard like this inside Writing Center, but she never thought about making a shared Google Doc for the team, so she likes that idea.
Great. Yeah, and then people can pop back to it anytime they want, which is really nice. And I think you can tailor this to your team. Maybe one of these sections doesn't make sense. No worries. You guys get the idea that it's just a place to house the information that will hopefully be helpful for your team that they can look at any point during the week. All right, I am going to hand it off here to Joanna Beth to talk a little bit about some communication platforms. We talked a lot about communicating. Now, what platforms can you use?
So really, I think we can fly through this slide. I'm seeing a lot in the chat about things people are already doing. So I think this is already in place. Probably the most important thing to say about this slide is just make sure that you keep student information off of certain channels, certainly Facebook and things like that, but you're going to want to check with your institutions on what is okay, which ones are internal and secure, and which ones would be a violation of FERPA. We always have to think about that. So just be sure that as a manager, you are setting expectations for that and clearly outlining what those expectations are based on the channels that people are using, what they can and cannot discuss in those channels. And Lauri, would you mind saying a little bit about Slack? Because I know that you use it a great deal.
Certainly. Slack is a fantastic communication device. It is like a running chat thread, but it is a little bit more robust than a regular chat because you can embed applications, and we'll show you in just a moment how that works. So it's just designed to make sure that you can communicate with your team. You can quickly access things that are currently being worked on all in one place rather than just sending email back and forth. And sometimes that's hard to keep track of which email was that in, who sent that email, where was that idea, and you can read that very easily in a Slack thread. So this video is going to demonstrate some of the features of Slack.
All right, here we go.
This video is demonstrating some of the features and benefits of using Slack as a communication tool for project management. Many times when you're working on a project, you find that you and your team are sending emails back and forth to ask what the status is of certain projects, to share files, and not all of those emails will be available for viewing at the same time or collated in the same place. So this is what a Slack channel does for you. Once you've joined Slack, you can create different channels. You can create public channels or private channels. You can see this one is a private channel, and we have been using this for the IWCA webinars. My collaborators and I have been posting questions and responding to each other, reacting to each other, posting documents and links to documents. And this has been very helpful because if we need to access something that is part of our project, we know we can find the link very quickly here. Of course, you have a lot of shared documents when you're working on a project. You might be working in Google Drive, you might be working in OneDrive, you might be working on your Trello board, you might have some links to some internet resources, and all of these come from different places, and it can get lost in the shuffle of multiple emails. But having a thread of communication, much like a chat message, you can really see all of that in one place. And you can also control your notifications. So unlike a Facebook or messenger chat that you have going that might be pinging you every time someone posts something, you can actually control when you are notified about different things that are being posted. So we have posted resources to each other, and some of those resources come from applications. So you can actually embed applications within Slack. So here you can see that we have embedded Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, Trello, and Zoom to use as our resources. So I want to post to my teammates that I am adding a document for the Slack demonstration video. But I also want to have a link to that document so they don't have to go to Google Drive and leave this chat to go find that document. I can simply attach using this attach button, add a file from Google Drive, and it's going to go right to our Google Drive. And I can find my sample document, which is right here. When it has been added, you can see that that populates. And I want to finish my comment on that so that my teammates know what this is. But you can see Google Drive is now communicating with me, and this message is only visible to me because I'm the one who posted it. But it says, hey, it looks like the sample Word document isn't viewable by everyone here, because you realize when you upload things into Google Drive, you have to make sure that the sharing permissions are working. So I may not have realized that. If I had just emailed this to some of my teammates, I might not have found that out, and they could have been frustrated and had to email back saying, could you please give me permission to view this document? Instead, the application being embedded within Slack has told me that there is a problem, and now I can share to anyone who has the link. and allow them to view, allow them to comment, or allow them to edit. Well, I trust my teammates here. They can edit as much as they would like. So I'll pick allow them to edit. And now it has been uploaded and anyone can open that and edit it who is part of my team. Not anyone in the world, but anyone who is part of this particular private group. So you can see there's a lot of benefits to having quick and easy access to documents.
Awesome. And I can speak as a Slack newbie. I loved it. I wasn't quite sure when I first created my account and I got in here, it took me a second to sort of orient myself, and I love Lauri's demonstration here. That would have helped me the first time around. But it's really, really nice. And so, with us being at different places, this was by far the easiest way for us to communicate. Joanna and Beth and I are both at WGU, so it was a little easier for me to send her something, but I didn't want to text Lauri separately and then Joanna Beth another way. Like, this was such a nice way for all three of us who are very separated from each other to communicate. So just as a newbie to it, I will give a thumbs up.
I completely agree, Amanda. I liked it a lot. I liked it that it kept everything in a single place and I wasn't having to scramble around. So we're going to talk about quality assurance next and ways to make sure that things are still getting accomplished, because certainly we all have goals that we need to be focused on, and as a team, your team knows what those goals are, and thankfully we've already had several months of the school year under our belt, so we're all sure about what those are. We're just not sure about how we're going to tackle them in this environment, and we'll talk about some ways to do that. On this slide, I placed a photo of this morning's Johns Hopkins map in the background because I just think it's important to remember that these are extraordinary times and we're working amid the backdrop of enormous societal upheaval. So the very best form of quality assurance we have is our faith in each other. That's always true, but it's especially true and important to remember right now. Our faith and our trust in each other. That is our quality assurance. So we just saw a very nuts and bolts way to track quality assurance and see what's going on with projects. But I kind of just wanted to bring us back out to the big picture for a moment, because next Amanda is going to talk about the personal side of those nuts and bolts tools.
Thanks, Joanna Beth. And I think what you just said is so important, because we tend to think of quality assurance as like, let's point out what's wrong. But that's not right. That's not really how it is. And I think that this is especially important for teams that are transitioning to an online environment, to know that they need to be reassured about what they're doing right and what they're doing well and how they're excelling and what they're accomplishing. They actually need that more than anything else, and especially in the current environment we're in. So it's really important that you do pay attention to what they're doing and how they're doing it, so you can provide primarily positive reinforcement, encouragement. And so there are a few ways you can do this depending on what your team is embarking on right now. You can drop in on calls if they're making student calls. You want to make sure you get permission from all parties for that. Obviously, you don't want to do that on the sly or secret. The student would need to approve, and so would your direct report. If they're providing video instruction or written feedback, you can review either one of those and then give some feedback on that. And then if needed, you can provide a student need analysis survey. But the big piece here is to pay attention to what they're doing well and to look for alternate ideas for how to approach something. And if you do want to provide a recommendation, make sure you sandwich that between good things, positive things. You did awesome with handling this student in this way. You want to talk about that a little bit, and then say, what else you could have done? You might have considered this. And then you want to follow up with something else, like something else really great that they did. You concluded that call in such a great manner. You gave next steps for that student. You made sure that he had the link he needed. And so that way people feel like they are being treated like people, and they're not just like checking boxes where it's like, you did this, you need to do this, this, and this. And something I recommend on this is being as personable as possible when you're delivering this. So talk to your people one-on-one about this. Use the camera if you can, or if that will make someone uncomfortable, don't. You can sort of feel that out. And if you notice across the team, there are some great big wins or some areas that really everybody could potentially revise, you can address that in a team meeting as well. But typically these happen in one-on-one sessions in which you really plan. You think about what you're going to say before you say it. And these can be really important to your team. And it's also really, really important, like I said, for them to know what they are doing well, because they may be very unsure. They may kind of feel like, hey, I think video instruction feedbacks are awesome, but I'm not sure. And so I think if they have your thoughts and opinions on that, they may feel like, okay, I'm doing great, and then they'll feel motivated and they'll feel like they're providing quality support for their students. So meetings, you want to think about your team meetings. So I just mentioned that you may want to address a large trend in a team meeting. Depending on your team, the size of your team and their schedules, you're going to want to think about some things before you make any decisions here. Do you need to meet? How often do you need to meet? How are you going to meet? Like, there's a lot of pieces and parts here. When do you need a meeting? We meet once a week, but it's very doable for our team. Typically, we have a shared space, we meet then. That may not be possible for your team, and you'll want to think about what else you can do. One thing that we have done in the past when a meeting is difficult because of timing, or lots of people are out presenting at a conference, or people are just, it's not possible for all of us to meet in one place, you as a leader can actually record a video or series of videos where you deliver some information. Much more of a connection than just sharing a Google Doc with the information. So you'll want to think about when a meeting is needed, and what other ways you can connect if a meeting is difficult to schedule. When you do have meetings, you'll want to think about having an agenda. We do this. We have an agenda that we post ahead of time. Those items typically come, it's similar to that manager doc. Sometimes they come from a need that I know we have as a university. Sometimes people request items. I strongly prefer having someone else talk other than me. So I may ask one of my team members, like, hey, can you highlight this project you're working on? Or can you share this major win you had with the student this week? So you'll want to think about that agenda and what belongs on it and the space you have allotted. And you want to make sure you address any team needs and you allow for some community building in that as well, which we had mentioned earlier. You may want to assign a note taker if that would be helpful for your team. It usually is. And then you'll want to think about, as we were saying before, you'll want to think about defining, how are we going to go about this meeting? Is there a separate section for Q&A? Are you the kind of team that needs to get through a bunch of information and then have Q&A at the end? Would you rather it be more interactive and there's questions throughout, like people can, raise their hand in a chat or post questions in a chat or just speak up, come off mute? But you'll want to set that expectation for your team because they may have no idea how it's going to work in an online environment. They may be used to having staff meetings in person where they're all sitting there together having their coffee. So you may want to think about, setting those sort of those best practices for your meeting or what would be best for your team. It is best if you can encourage participation. It's a little harder if you have a larger team. So you may want to rely on the chat a little more if you have a really large group. And of course, I'm going to promote the camera if possible. We've had a couple of times where I know Joanna, Beth created a retreat for our team, which was really cool. And we all brought like our hot chocolate or coffee and, we shared some things and we were on camera and the connection there was just amazing. So you may want to think about using the camera if you can for your team meetings. But
You know
really
what?
Yeah, go ahead, JB.
Sorry. One thing we did that really was an incredible bonding moment, we danced together. We played music and
Yeah, we
danced.
did.
I love
And
it.
it turned out to be the most joyous thing. And we still talk about that.
We do.
And who knew, that would be the thing.
I think people resist it because you feel this barrier when you go online, but you really can break that down. And then, I don't know, you really feel connected in a different way. Are there any questions about team meetings, Lauri, in the chat?
No questions, just some good reaction to the dancing that thinking of that.
I believe it.
Maybe adding a video in to inspire the dancing.
Great. And I think you guys will, make these meetings what your team needs. There is no right or wrong here. You'll want to think about these things and do the best, choose the best option for your team. So we're going to segue into project management, which I think JB is going to fly through here before we get to our end.
So really just hold off on your projects if at all possible right now while your team stabilizes to their new environment. If your goals are threefold, you're going to make this happen. Know how to support your team members as they complete their projects. Know the project status with the tools so you can update stakeholders, and then just know, how to allocate your time and the resources. And you can work with your individual team members on that because everybody's in a different situation right now. On the next slide, the key term here is trust. In project management, If you can trust your team, it's one of the most essential things you can do to meet your goals. And this is not opinion. This is in the scholarship and research on trust, leadership for flourishing, and positive organizational scholarship. And ultimately, you can think about trust in this way. It's about loving your people. And I'm not talking about being a sentimental sap of any sort. In fact, I'm going to use Amanda as an example here because she is not, sorry, Amanda, I know I can do this.
Go ahead, go for it.
She is not in the least a sentimental sap, but she's an amazing leader because she loves her people. And here's how she does it. She cares. She cares very deeply about each and every person on our team, even those who aren't her direct reports. And here's what that looks like. I've seen her. I've had a chance to work closely with Amanda, and I know how she works. I'm not one of her direct reports, but Amanda invests in the well-being of each person for their sake. She doesn't do it as a means to an end. And nobody on Amanda's team feels like a means to an end. That is essential. Amanda knows that the projects, those are the means to the end. The tools we use to get the projects done, those are the means to the end. But Amanda invests her time and support for people in a way that makes them a subject. And I don't mean subject in the sense of a subject to a monarch. I mean subject as in the sense of they know that they are essential substance to that team, to those students. And it is apparent in the questions she asks. It is apparent in the way she responds. She doesn't say things like, where are you with that project you're working on? The project management tool tells her that. She says things like, tell me about a time this week when something went really well, when things were just really going, because I want to put that in place for you. I want to know what circumstances were taking place to make that happen for you, because I want to make that happen for you all the time. She asks, how are you? What support do you need? So if you want your team's goals to not only be accomplished, but exceeded, and that is possible even in a crisis environment, if you want that to happen, you have to care more about your people than you do about the goals. And I know that may sound like management sacrilege, but it is absolutely the case, and it is borne out in the research, because when you take care of your people, the goals take care of themselves. And if that still sounds odd to you, think about it this way. What makes goals happen? Your people do. That's why your first priority has to be making sure your people are bolstered in ways that allow them to meet and exceed those goals. And in the resources that we'll make available with this recording, we'll give some further reading about this so you can look at it in the literature. You don't just have to believe me. But you can think about it like this. You might think that as a manager of faculty, the students have to be your first priority. The students are your faculty's first priority. It's why they do what they do. Trust them to do it. If your first priority is helping your faculty thrive, your faculty will help your students thrive. You can apply that to any environment. If your first priority is helping your team thrive, your team will help your clients thrive, your customers, your insert anything there. That's the key to flourishing leadership. Okay, we can move on. And these are the means to the end. We're going to provide these tools for you. You'll have a copy of this list, and so we can move on to the next slide.
Well, I wanted to jump in here if I could and talk a little bit about project management then. I lead a lot of projects and I work on projects individually, and it's hard to keep track when you have multiple projects going. So using something like a Kanban board as a tool is really helpful. So if you, in the chat, if you have used a Kanban board before, would you mind just saying I've used this or yes, so we can see how many people are doing that? I'm gonna keep on talking while I wait for those to populate. Some people have used some Kanban. So I'm going to give just a quick overview. It's just an agile project management tool that helps you to visualize work like on a timeline. So you group them into, it's like on a billboard, which is what Kanban means in Japanese. And it actually came out of Toyota manufacturing of keeping track of things. But you create little cards and you separate them into columns or into buckets. And it allows you to see who is assigned to a certain task, what the different steps are in the task, when the task is due, and what the progress is on that task. It's fantastic and visual. I use it when I'm working just on my own projects individually, or when I'm supervising or are trying to pull things together to work on a team project. So let's go ahead and play the video of Trello, which is an example of one of those tools. This video is demonstrating the features of Trello. Trello is a board that you use to track projects for your team. So every Trello board that you create, you can invite team members to that board, whichever team will be collaborating on that board. So at the top here, you can see this is the Trello board that we created for the IWCA webinars. All of our team members are here at the top, everyone that is participating. And you can see that there are 3 basic columns that are created: things to do, doing, and done. Within each of the columns, you can create cards. Usually they start off in the things to do column. To create a new card, you simply click on the plus sign to add another card. I'm going to work with a card that I had started, which was create a sample card. And if I click on it, you can see it opens up into where you have more information that you can edit. So this one is coming up soon, coming due tomorrow, and I want to add a checklist of different steps I need to complete to create this card. So I can create a checklist. I don't need to call it anything different than checklist, and simply add. And now I can add items to that checklist. For example, I could add a due date, assign a team member. So those are 2 simple items. Now, of course, when you have tasks, you're not going to create cards for things that are quite this simple. There are things that you're doing a little bit more tracking on, but I just wanted to demonstrate that for you. When I close this, it's going to close the entire card. But you can see I forgot to do something here. I did not put the team member on this card. I've already put a due date before I started the video, but I haven't put a team member. I can either open the card back up, or I can simply right click and I can select where it says change members and select my name. And now I've assigned that. I can hit save. And that's a real quick editing function. But now we all know that I have done the sample card. It's ready to go. So I can click this and open it and check off items on my checklist. Let's say it was in progress, that I put the due date on, but I haven't done anything else yet. I could close this card and then again right click on it, go to the move button, and now I can move it to the doing list. And so my team members can say, I see that Lauri is working on this project. And if they want to know more details about what step I am, they can open it up and see my checklist and see what I have left to do. This is wonderful for collaboration, because if somebody is done with his or her project and feels like they want to contribute time to someone else's project, they can suggest, hey, I see you still need to do this item. I'm free. Would you like me to do that for you? And there can be some communication among the team. Well, now, of course, I've already assigned a team member, so we can check that off. Yeah, we want to go ahead and stop and go to the next one.
Okay. You got it.
Because I know we're at the top of the hour.
All right. Yeah, I think we're at our time. So if there are questions, we'd be happy to answer. I know some of you probably have to jump off. So if you do have to leave, thank you so much for coming. We really, really appreciate it. We hope we were helpful. And if there are some questions, we're happy to answer.
You guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to be here. We really appreciate it.
Fantastic. I'm glad it was helpful, Dwayne. He said he has lots of notes. So we will share both of those videos as well that were embedded into the PowerPoint. So that if you want to take some time to look at those tools, you can certainly do that. We appreciate so much, Sherry, that you allowed us to use your space here and that you're sponsoring this. It has been a great way to get information out to people in a time that they're perhaps transitioning and need a little extra support. So we thank you for your involvement.
And thank you for what you've taught us today in the chat, the new things you've introduced us to. I wanted to say that to you, Dwayne. You know, you mentioned this has been helpful, but I took some things away from your participation in the teaching webinar the other day too.
So I'm seeing lots of thank yous. Let's see here. There was a question up here. Will we be doing any more webinars in the next few weeks? Our personal team is not planning on any, but if you have some ideas for webinars, I'm sure that you can pose them to Sherry and she can reach out and find people to support that. And of course, if there's something that we can do, we would love to support in any way that we can.
I think I need to go reintroduce myself to my family after this week. Preparing for
It has
this.
been, yes, the same thing. We have had family birthdays in the middle of this week and personal birthdays, so it's fun. But this has been a great collaboration project. And
Yes, it has. And just lovely to be with people in this space who care so deeply about what they're doing, you know, with their teams, and to be inspired by you all is really heartening. And I'm honored to be in your presence.
And please share it widely with anyone you think that might benefit from this. It's our goal to help people, not to be proprietary about the information. We just want to share what we have. To make
my cousin is a kindergarten teacher, and she shared it with her circle of friends.
Awesome.
The one you did on Tuesday with her circle of friends, she got all excited about all the tools that you talked about, and they're meeting remotely with each other and with families. So
that's great.
My son's kindergarten teacher just did a Zoom meeting with his class this morning, and it was just all about socialization. It wasn't, she didn't try to teach anything, and
so fun.
It brightened his day so much. He was jumping around afterwards, just like, I got to see my class. I saw so-and-so, I saw so-and-so. And just, they were showing off their Legos and stuff they were doing. And it was just
like virtual show and tell, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
That takes me back to when I was a little girl, and I was so excited. I finally had both a show and tell. So I went in, it was kindergarten, you know, in the 70s, we wore dresses all the time. And I sat down and I told the class that I had a show and a tell. And I proceeded to pull my skirt up because I had been bitten by a German Shepherd. And I recovered from it, right? But I wanted the whole class to hear about it and to see it. My teacher dove across the room to try to pull my skirt down. Teaching, by the way, I think our class just kind of wore her out.
That is awesome. Yeah, and so that you can see just the connection for the kids, and even now, just having a little time to chat even afterwards here is great when we've been so stressed by what we're hearing on the news or isolated. Should I even go to the store to get groceries? You have to debate these things. So having a little human connection where you can laugh and share some ideas, you can see how meaningful that would be to your team. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything new populating in the chat here, so we could probably wrap it up. And ladies, if there's anything that we need to communicate about, please feel free to email me or put it on Slack so we can collaborate and continue to get those videos out. And if other ideas come up where you think our little production team would be helpful, I'm sure that we can scramble and get something together, because we would love to do anything we can to support.
Thanks again, everybody.
Everyone.
Be well,
Bye.
everyone.
And